trade practices, and climate change. Today, majority of undernourished and facing famine lives in conflict-driven countries such as Syria, Afghanistan, the Horn of Africa, and the Sahel. The greatest concern is the grievous plight of the people under foreign occupation, such as people of Jammu and Kashmir, who suffer brutal oppression, extrajudicial killings, and other human rights violations, extended curfews, lockdowns, arbitrary detentions, and illegal demographic displacement and dispossession. Pakistan is facing challenges in food security, water security, and energy security because of a whole host of issues ranging from climate change and global developments. Largely due to climate change and insufficient investment in agriculture, Pakistan's food security situation has become fragile. We will need to import wheat this year, whereas the supply chain of wheat at global level is already disrupted. We know that other countries, Afghanistan, Africa, are in even more precarious situation. The ongoing war in Ukraine and the accompanying restrictions on food supply are the crowning blow for the poor. Prices of food, energy have spiraled. Food and related commodities, including fertilizers, are in short supply and unaffordable for the poorest people and the poorest countries in Africa, continent, Afghanistan, and elsewhere. A number of countries face famine. Over 50 countries are in financial and debt distress and may be pushed into financial meltdown if major central banks raise interest rates, as some have signaled. We need an emergency action plan to ramp up food production, keep supply chains open, assist poor farmers, and build a food bank. We hope sufficient financial resources will be mobilized for this purpose. However, to overcome poverty and hunger, we need to address the complex structural and systemic issues impeding food production by developing countries. This is an essential component of the global effort to implement the SDGs. This global effort has suffered serious setbacks due to COVID, climate change, and conflicts in the last few years. We are hopeful that the US-sponsored meetings will mobilize significant practical actions to prevent famine and hunger among the poorest countries and people. I would also like to talk about Afghanistan issue. For the first time in 40 years, there is an opportunity to stabilize Afghanistan. The entire country is under the control of one government. There is no civil war. We should not let one start again. As you all know, that Pakistan is a neighboring country, and if there is instability in Afghanistan, Pakistan is the first country to pay the price. Like others, we are disappointed that the Afghan government has not been responsive on issues of concern to the international community, especially the issues of girl education and recent restrictions on women. This is likely the result of their complex decision-making process. We believe, however, that it is necessary to continue to engage with the Afghan government and to persuade them to revise these decisions. The Afghans do not respond well to perceived coercion. Therefore, any threat to stop economic assistance to Afghanistan is likely to be counterproductive. The solution is more engagement. For Pakistan, the major problem is cross-border terrorism from Afghanistan by TTP and ISIS-K. While reserving the right to take action against terrorists, Pakistan is continuing its efforts to convince the Afghan government to take effective action to neutralize these groups and other terrorist groups in Afghanistan. We are also working with other stakeholders, including US, China, and Russia, to this end. We have an immediate challenge in Afghanistan of how to avert dire humanitarian crisis and stressed it as essential to consider additional ways to facilitate banking channels to spur economic activity. Conflicts can be very traumatic for nations, as was evident from the prolonged struggle against international terrorism, which had affected our region and beyond. We underline the importance of inclusivity, protection of human rights, especially of women and girls, and timely humanitarian relief in Afghanistan. Women empowerment is an absolute priority for Government of Pakistan. Pakistan's position on Kashmir in the United Nations is well known. At the UN, the resolution of Jammu and Kashmir dispute under the auspices of UN Security Council resolutions is a challenge for the conscience of international community. Durable peace between Pakistan and India will continue to be elusive unless the dispute over Jammu and Kashmir is resolved on the basis of UN Charter and the relevant resolutions of the Security Council. India's illegal and unilateral steps since 5th August 2019 to eliminate Jammu and Kashmir's identity, to mount a massive campaign of repression against its people and its attempt to change its demography from a Muslim majority to a Hindu majority territory have created imposing barriers to a just resolution of the dispute. If the tensions created by India's cruel policies in occupied Kashmir and aggressive postures are left unattended, it could lead to another conflict in the region with potentially catastrophic consequences. Therefore, I emphasize the need to resolve the Jammu and Kashmir dispute in accordance with the resolutions of the Security Council and the wishes of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. I also want to touch upon the issue of Russia-Ukraine war. Pakistan is deeply concerned by the initiation and continuation of the war in Ukraine. Pakistan has always called for consistent and universal application of UN Charter principles, including non-use or threat of use of force, respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of states, pacific settlement of disputes, and equal security for all states in order to ensure lasting peace and security. We support the several nations and the collective efforts underway to respond to this humanitarian crisis and the need of the affected people and the needs of the affected people. We will continue to call for immediate cessation of hostilities and the need for diplomacy and dialogue for an early negotiated end to the Ukraine conflict. Although Pakistan is one of the least carbon emitters, it is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change and global warming. We are making our contribution to mitigating emissions mainly through nature-based solutions such as reforestation and adoption of cleaner energy. Recently, government has started a major initiative to promote solar energy and replace fossil fuel with solar energy and renewable energy in the country so that we can make a very fast transition to clean energy. We also need massive investment in climate adaptation projects to end pollution in our cities, rivers and lakes, and in respond to frequent floods and drought. Pakistan is currently facing serious rainfall, severe rainfall due to climate change, which has brought a lot of destruction in many parts of the country. Pakistan's ambitious environmental program deserves generous international support. So far, we are not seeing meaningful support for Pakistan's effort to mitigate the effects of climate change from the developed world, whose irresponsible development is causing major suffering in Pakistan due to climate change. Unfortunately, Islamophobia is growing in many parts of the world. Pakistan welcomes UN General Assembly's recognition of this challenge by deciding to observe 15th March each year as the International Day to Combat Islamophobia. We need an agreed international action plan to combat Islamophobia and other forms of intolerance and hate. With this, I will end here and will be happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I would now like to give floor to who are present in the room. Martin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Minister. First of all, welcome to the United Nations.
Can you put the mic?
Sorry. I asked that so close. Okay. Minister, thank you for the briefing. Welcome to the United Nations. Martin Wang from Xinhua. My question for you, Mr. Minister, is that how will Pakistan, as the chair of the G77, coordinate the efforts to address the issue of supply chain shocks? Thank you.
Pakistan has proposed to the UN that it must lead an international effort to provide support to the developing countries to mitigate the effects of this supply shock that we are suffering. And let me also add, as president of G77, Pakistan has also proposed to the UN leadership that it intends to host a conference of G77 countries to carry out a mid-review of sustainable development goals so that after 7 years we can review the progress on achievement of sustainable development goals, and for the next 8 years we can draw up accelerated roadmap so that we do not miss on very important goals that have been outlined in SDGs, particularly zero hunger and zero poverty.
From Geo and Jan Group of newspapers. Just now you talked about Kashmir and Kashmir's international as a international disputed territory. Now India is trying to hold a G20 meeting over there, which will affect very badly to the internationally disputed territory of Kashmir. What is your reaction and what kind of efforts Pakistan has made to convince the international community that Kashmir remains an international disputed territory where these kind of international conferences can't be held?
I think the issue of Jammu and Kashmir is recognized by the Security Council of UN as a disputed territory. Therefore, if G20 countries decide to go there for a meeting, they have to throw out the Security Council resolutions in the dustbin of history. If Security Council has any sanctity, if its resolutions have any sanctity, I hope that the G20 countries will not violate the sanctity of those resolutions by going there and validating the occupation, unilateral occupation of Jammu and Kashmir, or unilateral annexation in violation of the Security Council resolutions. G20 countries will become party to this dispute. I think that will be not fair and not according to the spirit of the resolutions passed by Security Council. So I do hope that G20 countries will respect the spirit and the disputed nature of Jammu and Kashmir.
वज़ीर मनसूबाबंदी और तरक्की अहसन इकबाल न्यूयॉर्क में प्रेस ब्रीफिंग कर रहे हैं। उनका कहना है कि दुनिया को इस वक्त माहौलियाती आलूदगी और सिक्योरिटी जैसे मसाइल का सामना है। पायदार तरक्की के अहदाफ का हुसूल हर मुल्क का एजेंडा है। आलमी सतह पर ग़ज़ाई तहफ़्फ़ुज़ जैसे मसाइल का सामना है। पाकिस्तान भी उन ममालिक में शुमार है जिनमें ग़ज़ाई तहफ़्फ़ुज़ के मसाइल हैं। किसी भी तरक्की पजीर मुल्क को श्रीलंका जैसी सूरत हाल का सामना नहीं करना चाहिए। तरक्की याफ्ता ममालिक को आगे आना चाहिए और गरीब ममालिक की मदद करनी चाहिए। जी नाज़रीन, आप हमारे साथ रहे, आपका बहुत शुक्रिया।